everybody. My name is Jennifer Walinga. I'm a professor of communication and culture at Royal Roads University in Victoria, British Columbia. And welcome to our webinar series on sport, leadership, and social change. Today, it's my pleasure to interview Isabelle Cayer with the Coaching Association of Canada. And we're going to talk about a whole host of topics because she has her hand in a number of pies. But I think we'll have a lovely conversation, and I just want to give a bit of background on the webinar series to begin with, and of course start by acknowledging the land that we're on. I currently reside in Cadboro Bay in Victoria, BC, the first lands of the Kasatsim and Lekwungen peoples, also known as Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations communities. And we always want to thank and acknowledge them for allowing us to live and work, learn, teach, and play on their lands. These are unceded territories. And I feel particularly blessed because I can walk through Mystic Vale each day with my doggies and gaze out on the Cadboro Bay, home of, for centuries, home of the Lekwungen Kasatsim peoples. We also give thanks to the ancestors, the supernatural ones, hereditary leaders and matriarchs, creatures big and small, for looking after the rich resources and cultural teaching of these beautiful lands. We rely on the lands hugely at Royal Roads as part of our learning. And our very checkered history, you know, we also understand that it's a past full of change and some dark history, some light history, but our logo kind of speaks volumes to that approach to change, that we must acknowledge the past before we can move into the future. And I love this image of Deadpool. We have many movies produced on site, filmed on site, and so I get to see Ryan Reynolds every once in a while. But it's such a great contrast of the old and new. And if you're watching one of those movies, this is our former president trying to have fun on Instagram with Ryan, a Canadian, of course. We also acknowledge learning in all its forms at Royal Roads. We like to invite people and acknowledge their professional practice and experience as credit at Royal Roads. It's one of the first places that acknowledged that kind of professional experience through our flexible admission policy. But I just love that approach to learning and living that is so embodied in our model of research, teaching, and learning. This webinar series really responds to, I think, a number of the themes that we uphold here as a very social purpose university. Sport, leadership, and social change speaks to the many programs that we offer, reflecting itself as a theme that threads itself across all the programs in development, diversity and inclusion, education, environment, equity and human rights, health, media and communication, and peace. And you can see those themes reflected then in multiple sport organizations across the world. I think it's a particularly perfect site to explain and discuss and explore sport as a leadership phenomenon, because we at Royal Roads really want to foster social change, positive social change. And this bridge is really important to me. It exists and resides in one of the gardens on campus. It's our metaphor for our school, a bridge of communication. But embedded in this concept of a bridge is this idea of diversity, that without diversity, if you look around the old growth forest that surrounds us on our campus, it smacks you squarely in the face how important diversity is. We wouldn't thrive without it. And before we can build a bridge, we need to understand both sides, right? We need to understand the banks that we're trying to bridge or build a bridge across. So whether it's a handshake or an extension of your hand to someone else or an actual concrete bridge like this, it begins with embracing diversity and understanding differences, which I think is essential in sport as well. We also have partnerships with different sport organizations, including Game Plan, and we're working on one with the Canadian Football League as well, their Players Association, acknowledging, again, not just professional experience in the typical sense, but as athletes. Of course, sport is an education, or it can be. It isn't always, and that's what we want to talk about today. With the help of Isabelle, we'll explore topics relevant to sport. Sport I think, holds or is a site of many challenges, human rights issues, equity issues, inclusion issues, and we see those played out literally and figuratively on the field of sport in many different ways. But it also offers potential, a lever or a vehicle for change, for combating some of these challenges that we face as a society. So welcome to today's episode. I will be speaking with Isabelle about her different experiences working within the realm of sport. She's been at the Coaching Association of Canada for many years, and I've been following her and exploring her career. She's been involved in so many different initiatives and avenues of, I think, of social change through sport. So welcome, Isabelle. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. We'll have about 45 minutes or an hour. Let's just see where the conversation goes. But first, I wanted you to just give more of an introduction to yourself, some of the initiatives you've worked on during your career, and some that you're working on right now, and maybe some future goals that you have as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer, so much for having me. So my name is Isabelle Cayer, and I'm here in Ottawa on the unceded territory of the Algonquin people, and very much appreciate my ability to enjoy the land that we live on here, and it brings so much joy to myself and the community at large. So I guess to start, I'll speak from a place of understanding and acknowledgement of the privileged life that I've had, and certainly have reflected on my life and my journey many times over the course of my career, and the interactions I've had with coaches or other people, and it really sort of grounds you in your belief system, in the work that you do, what you're passionate about. So for me, if I give a few highlights of my work and my time, I grew up in Labrador City, and I'll speak more to that when we talk about the role that sport has played in my life. But I've been in Ottawa for over 25 years now, and I came here to go to university, and I pursued a degree that at the end I realized I wasn't that interested in, because my true love and passion was sport, and quickly trying to find some ways to navigate how that can be my career. So I definitely was involved in the skating club at the university, and then I got into some coaching with the City of Ottawa and their Community and Sports Services Department, and just made some connections there, and found my way to Skate Canada, which is the national body for figure skating. And I worked in corporate affairs, and I learned so many things about how board of directors work, and how, with the staff, and like my view of being an athlete in the sport and then being a coach, and really bringing all that together, and the inner workings of the organization, and some really great leadership in those days that I really learned so much being really in the heart of the corporation, and the dynamics with the board. So I was, it just was one of those connections that I made that, led me there. And with my background in skating, just, was a really good place to land. So was really grateful for my time there. And then they restructured the coaching department, and I was coaching at the time. So of course it was of interest to me, and a couple of positions came up, and so I applied, and I was successful in getting a position as a competitive program manager at the time. And so I really had to take a look at, the system, and they had a really great organization. They're very progressive in terms of structuring coach education, and bringing in other requirements like first aid, and then being one of the first sports to implement criminal record checks, which I was a part of. But the other aspect of it was that it was lacking a little bit, was like, have the connection of the coaching community. And that was what I started to feel was, where I could play a role. And so that was just from talking to all the stakeholders and really engaging with coaches. So that became my vision for trying to create those opportunities, and creating like a national bringing a national conference back, for coaches, and providing those developmental opportunities to experience like a national championships and an apprentice role, and see how all the logistics and, meet the coaches that the coaches they're world class. Like figure skating has such a long and successful history, and just those opportunities to meet people and make those connections, and everyone being so willing to help, grow the sport and other coaches on their pathway. So just really, really a wonderful experience for me. And also just the professionalization of coaching. So the fact that, in the sport like figure skating, which I also was involved in, it's a viable career option. You can be paid. All coaches are paid. All coaches are trained. All coaches meet certain requirements. So my view was just that was the way that coaching was. So when I transitioned to the Coaching Association of Canada, I took on a role as a coaching consultant, and really it was moving into more of the coach education side. I've been doing that work at Skate Canada, and I've been involved in some of the committees of the CAC and really liked some of the initiatives they had. So I took it as an opportunity to grow and move into a multi-sport environment. And it was just such a huge learning for me to start to understand more about the sports system in a way that I hadn't really been that tapped into before. So for me, it was just the structures were different, and just a huge learning curve. And on my first day, my director came in and said, "Oh, I have some news for you. You'll also be the manager of the Women in Coaching program." So of course I was ecstatic, and I thought, this is wonderful. I had no idea, and so I started navigating that and working in the area and really digging in and exploring it. And to be honest, it was such an eye opener, because in my view of the world and my experiences, women could do anything. Women were leaders. Women were coaching. Women were pursuing their careers. They were the executive director of Skate Canada at the time was female. And so, it was just, my world was surrounded by strong women and leaders. And so when I started to dig into all the barriers of coaching, I couldn't believe it. And I thought, like, I am 38 years old and I have so much to learn. And, and that's where I really started to go back and go, okay, so what is it that's happened in my life that, I've kind of missed these, not that I wasn't aware of society at large and, the microaggressions that you experience because of gender and these types of things, but it was just that it was just so eye-opening in terms of where we really needed some support for our women coaches. And we have a lot of wonderful programs in place. So it was nice to sort of pick that up and try to go with it. But I really had to do a deep dive in understanding what was going on in the system. So I've been doing a lot of that work, which I think we're going to get into a little later. And, it's something that I'm very passionate about, and, try to do as much as I can, within my area of responsibility. And it can only grow and become better with, a lot more people on board, a lot more organizations, a lot more support, financially and with human resources. So there's been a huge momentum and movement more recently. So COVID has, kind of taken a hit on some of that momentum, but I'm optimistic that things will keep rolling. And so so that's so what's happened in my role is that I was in that coaching consultant role for about 9 years or so, and then had a wonderful opportunity, and in a lot of the conversations that I have with our CEO, Lorraine Lafreniere, who's a wonderful leader and a wonderful component of developing people first, and being really open to supporting our dreams and our careers and our pathways, whether they're inside or outside of the CEC. So that was always something that she was open and willing to do. So I had some conversations with her and some of the challenges that I wanted to explore a little bit more. So what happened was we ended up creating a manager of diversity inclusion position that I was able to move into. And so that was really exciting. And, the transition of moving from really focused in on women to really having a better understanding of the different dimensions of diversity and the intersection of being, say, a woman with a disability or an Indigenous woman, just again was just like a huge awakening. And where I think we made a lot of progress in having more women coaches, it was predominantly white women. So, it's just another thing that it's like, yeah, we have a lot more work to do here. And so I started down that path, and we received some grants that allowed us to employ, another additional person. So, we were a department of two, and then there was some need in the system for more focus around sports safety. And so a director of sports safety position opened up a year ago. And so I thought it was a really good opportunity to merge some of the equity, diversity, inclusion work with the sports safety portfolio, so safe sport and professional coaching. And so I went for the position, and I was successful in getting it. So it's just, it feels a bit of some of the work that I was doing at Skate Canada around the professional coaching pieces, bringing a little bit of that back, and continuing to explore our equity, diversity, inclusion portfolio. So this is where I am today, and it's been a year, and it's been wonderful and interesting, with being in a pandemic for the same amount of time, but good opportunities to really dive in and connect, and really opens things up where you have more access to a lot of things that are going on online. And so this is where we're at, and I'm happy to explore the conversation further with your guidance here.
It's really amazing to hear you describe your career trajectory, because it describes the webinar series. We start with talking about leadership and the role kind of broadly in society and organizations, and then we started talking about gender more specifically. Then we're broadening out into diversity, and which of course takes you into human rights. And I would think, and you and I have talked about safe sport before, but it really is a human rights concept, protecting people's rights.
Yes.
To a safe environment. Hey, so thank you for that. Beautiful. I always like to rely more on my guests for their introductions, because the stories are so much more rich, of course, and me spouting off of bioism is great, I think. So thank you. And wonderful to hear the story. I'd love to hear more about Skate Canada, because I think that really is the key, the knowledge that you gained organizationally. It was really interesting to hear you talk about what you learned in that experience about how an organization functions. And so I'd love to dig into that a little more in a minute as well. But let's talk too about sport, sport for you in general. We talk about it having issues, but it also is this powerful force in the world. So like a source of issue, but a force for change. And you talk about what sport represents for you. What meaning has it held for you through your life?
Yeah, I guess, for me, I think back, and sport has always been a part of my life. Like it is, it's been a way of life for me. And it really started when I grew up in Labrador City, which is a small town that was, an outdoor playground. Like it's just like a community that really embraced physical activity and outdoor recreation. And it was a lifestyle, summer and winter. And it was definitely winter wonderland. And in fact, we hosted a World Cup, cross-country skiing World Cup event in the early 80s. So, just speaks to the quality of, the trails and whatnot that we had in such a small place. So, for me, it was everything. It was my social life. My friends and I would go for a 5-kilometer ski as a social activity. The town would participate in community walks for participation, the programs of the 80s. And, I've thought about it, and just, it's something that is just a part of my whole life, like it in every aspect, like in my work life, in my volunteer world, in my life with my children, and providing those experiences to them, and then encouraging them to take on coaching roles. So it's just been, and as an adult, trying new sports, and so sport is about connection, right? It's about a social connection. It's about people. It's about community. Sport is freedom. It's movement. It's fun. It's healthy for your mind and body. It's life changing. It's if you find your passion through sport, or if it's your outlet from other challenges in your life. It develops your confidence. It prepares you for life's challenges. There's there's just so many positive things that sport can bring. And for me, it's almost always been a positive experience. And so, I think it just comes through in my work and why I, just continue to pursue all the opportunities available to get us to a place where sport is safe for everyone. And that's really my business, that's the business I'm in right now. And, so it's about education and training. It's about professionalizing coaching, and it's just about redefining what safe sport is, and that it inherently is safe, right? So that's really where I want to go with the role and my career. So yeah, and I mean, if everyone could have those positive experiences through any, through their community, no matter the means available, right? And that's the thing that I also reflected on in terms of in my elementary school days, the girls and the boys programs, as in those days were separated. So my phys ed teacher, she stayed at school every day so that we could play sports at lunch. So she literally developed a generation of physically literate girls, and it was the same thing on the boys' side, because they were having the same experiences. So, just we got engaged in all types of things like orienteering and square dancing and all kinds of stuff, and it was just amazing. So, and when I was 6, my mom took me skating. I still have these vivid memories of her taking me. Like, I remember the day, and I remember I was falling all over the ice, and I just absolutely loved it. And of course, she signed me up for skating, and that was my introduction to organized sport, and I just loved it, and I've always loved it, and I still volunteer to this day, in sport. So it's just been a big part of my life. And I would skate in the summers, and so you get those experiences of other new cities and new people, and so it was just great. And my coach in my teenage years, my coach Robert had like a huge impact on me, and I was just so impressed by him, his confidence, his drive, his organizational skills, his planning, his passion for learning, his vision, his goals for himself, for me, for our club, and he just really took the club to another level. And I just remember like that is why I'm involved in coaching. It was just the fact that he had such a positive impact on my life, and I just thought, and he gave me that confidence to coach too. And it's really what ignited my passion for coaching, because as I transitioned out of being an athlete and moved into coaching, I realized even now when I reflect on it that I actually really love coaching more, in the end. And and we still are in touch today, Robert and I. So it's just one of those things that who would have thought that 30 years ago that I would still have these really positive feelings about those experiences. And it's one of the things that he's like a role model for coaching, right? For coaches, for that impact and the power of somebody, and how they can have such a positive influence on your life, both as an athlete, but just as a whole person. So yeah, so I just want to share that, because it's really part of everything that represents who I am, and those experiences that I've really reflected on, particularly when I started working in the women in coaching portfolio.
Right. Yeah, the eyes open. And that was a neat story too, to describe how you came from this happy place, and then you start delving into these other areas, and you realize, wow, all this other stuff's going on I didn't know about. And that's the thing, I think we have parallel lives, the same kind of small town, and just the outdoor, the mentors, the positive experiences all around. My daughter and I count up our coaches, and we both had around 30 in our lives, and you think out of all of those, they were just fantastic people. So I never really had a bad experience, right?
Yeah.
And you think it's so crucial. You just want to protect the reputation of sport, because it can
Absolutely.
be so spectacular. And you just see your face is beaming, you've got stories, you're bubbling over with positive memories. And I laughed when you said, and I fell all over the ice and I just loved it. And I thought, yeah, the first time I held an oar, I don't think I used it. I just sat there in the boat holding the balance. Like I didn't actually row, but I loved it. And that was it. I was going to do it for the rest of my life. So
Yeah,
not like you have to be good to fall in love with these things either, or discover that, oh, I'm magnificent on my skates. It,
yeah,
it's just loving the whole thing, isn't it?
yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So tell me more about, if you don't mind, telling me more about the role of, you talked about professionalization of sport. So, we're hearing lots of stories about some of the issues in sport now, and not just now, but for years and years. We've seen the history of how long it's taken women to be invited into sport or treated with any kind of real respect. Rowing, you were only allowed to row 1,000 meters instead of two, and you had to have a coxswain steering your boat no matter what the size, because clearly you can't steer a boat, and just crazy assumptions around it, right? So we know there's a history there. We
Yeah.
know there are issues. And you've mentioned a few times professionalization of coaching, and what role does that play? How do you see that as a big lever for change?
Yeah, I guess, it's a number of things, I guess. It's partly, I guess I could look at it from two ways. Like one is providing like a clear pathway for coaches, and not just coaches, but organizations, right? Like how do I get involved in coaching? What do I need to do? And we have a system that, sports, differ in their pathways. They have different requirements. Clubs might have different requirements than, so it's very, can be very confusing to navigate, I suppose. But at the same time, if you think about a profession like law or massage therapy, or any sort of professions that are that have, like a college for teachers, or something, a body that you sort of are a part of. It's a bit of the concept of just um, creating the community and creating the standards that are fairly equivalent, right, in terms of training, as an example. So if you're, if you are a club that wants to engage a coach, and like, what's the baseline? What's the minimum that I should be looking for? And so part of it is just on having some standards, and simple and clear pathways. So things like, make ethical decisions is an example. So within the NCCP program, you would, as a base, like if you're a trained coach, you have your make ethical decisions. If you're a certified coach, you have taken the make ethical decisions evaluation. So that is like one of the foundational pieces of the NCCP. And so if you keep sort of like that concept in mind, and now we've introduced the mandated safe sport training, which is more applicable at a national level, with the federal government implementation of the Universal Code of Conduct. This is one of the elements. So it's happening a little bit at the federal level, but just, I guess, coming back to that, the professional side of it is that creating it, like positioning coaching as a professional and viable career. So and with that comes some standards. So criminal record checks, as an example, a code of conduct or code of ethics, or code of ethics. Some training, whether it's the make ethical decisions, something that looks like safe sport training, perhaps something around equity, diversity, inclusion, just something that's kind of gives a good base. And then you kind of build on the base with some of the sport technical pieces, right? So it just, it helps to sort of equalize that coaches are coming in with this base level of knowledge, and at the same time create standards where people are understand a code of conduct and can follow a code of conduct, and also for the system and for organizations, right, that you hire coaches in. So you can either through some sort of programming, whether it's something that we offer like with our professional coaching program, or just a way for them to know when they're hiring what to look for. So I guess what I'm getting at in the long way is that I think it helps to bring some clarity, and at the same time, by bringing standards, the dream goal for me would be that all coaches were certified, and also that they were paid. So, and I understand that our system relies very heavily on volunteers, and I'm a volunteer, and I in the system of like large events and any type of event, you need volunteers, and you need volunteer parent coaches too. But I just think that it would help to make it more viable from the perspective that even if we had university programs that were dedicated to coaching, and then you can transition into positions that are so it just kind of makes the whole system more just generally professionalized, right? So that's kind of the bigger picture view of what my vision would be for the future. And I mean, it doesn't, my position is not really that it would guarantee more safety from the perspective of some behaviors that happen within sports or other environments where predators go. But by implementing things like responsible coaching movement with the framework of having the background screening, which is not just criminal record checks, but actually checking references, calling former employers, and just talking to other colleagues, and just having some of the training pieces, and then the rule of two as a really big component. And that's where their major shift is happening right now, right? And a big change in even like the coach athlete relationship, and how that's been seen before and now today. So those are the types of things that I guess are what I consider part of the professionalization of coaching. And so what it does is it gives a bit more teeth to the profession itself, and that we do have these things in place. And at the same time, it helps guide organizations and parents and guardians that when they're looking for something to put their kids into, they're looking at various sectors. So how do we make the sports sector more transparent in how it operates, and what those standards are, and what people can expect when they show up in these programs, and they have they hand over their children to be taught, or to be in your program and spend time with you, and what does that look like, and what are the expectations, and what drives all that is back to what I said before about like my feelings about sport, and all the positive things that it brought to my life is what I would love for everyone to experience. So it's one of the components, I think. So it's like there's the operational side of sport, and then there's the relational side, right? And I think they can go hand in hand.
And everything we do is communicating our values, our beliefs, our assumptions. And so when we communicate or create these kinds of structures of professionalism, we're communicating to the world that this career, this pathway, this endeavor is valuable, like it is for a doctor, accountant, teacher, lawyer, anybody else that's in a profession and has credentials. So we're lifting the coaching, and then that gives coaches more value in society's eyes, but also it just simply heightens the expectations, right, for the role. Yeah, so it can only be good for everybody. I think it's a wonderful pursuit. There's also a dearth of coaching, right? There's a dearth of coaches. We may not be, partly because we don't pay, anyone really. And then the other piece is just that there's no real pipeline pushing them through. I often end up hearing, why are there no women coaches in this one realm? Or I'll challenge someone on, why didn't you hire a woman coach here, or at least interview a couple? And I'll be faced with the response, well, they didn't apply. And that's it. It's like end of story. Well, we need to be more intentional. And now this leads into that realm of diversity, inclusion, and gender equity. And how do we foster that diversity across the coaching spectrum and across sport in general? But let's start with coaching. What are some things that you're working on, or that you see helping that movement to broaden our diversity?
Yeah, so we've done a couple of things that I think are starting to work. And one of the shifts we made, we did a lot of workshops with bringing like women from multiple sports together into an environment that provided them with a support system, provided them with a network, provided them with opportunities in a safe space to discuss some of the things that they were experiencing or where they needed support. So those types of environments are really powerful. But also then you have to go back into your environment, right? So if you don't have the tools or the networks to help support, that's where we start to lose people. And so we tried, keeping that in mind and some of the trends happening, we thought, well, what are some other ways that we can help support? And so we looked at, we do have some grants that we provide to our national sport organizations, and it's seed money. It's a small amount, but the idea is to try to, inspire them to create opportunities for women coaches. So if it's just, if attending a national training camp, so it gives an opportunity for someone that's, up and coming or interested to participate and see how it all works. And we know in some cases it's then provided them with an opportunity to take on a team to an international event, as an example. So these, small, but really impactful things have really helped to, bring some women coaches that otherwise wouldn't have those practical experiences to, and that's what kind of stops them from getting those positions sometimes, is that they don't have the experience. But they have the education, they have some experience, but not at the level. So it's like you need the international to get the international job. Okay, so how's that going to happen if you never get the international job, right? So it's that kind of thing that, so, just, it's really like a lot of it's dialogue. A lot of it is conversations with partners, trying to get, it's easier to get to the people that are like-minded and want to do work and maybe don't have all the means, but we have some of those tools and resources that they don't have to, recreate things. So for sure, that's where we try to be out there a little bit more and say, hey, we already have some of these. You can just, use these, or we can help you. And so it's just, sometimes it just takes a bit of, inspiration or a bit of funding or just a dedicated time, right, to do that. And then in other instances, what we've done is we've tried to help support people in their own environment. So instead of bringing them out of their environment together, we're like, okay, so let's try to help develop and support them in their environment. So what we did was we created a university female mentorship program. And one of the things that inspired that was, when you're working in administration like myself, there's a lot of things going on in the background with politics, with funding, with the number of people you're servicing. So these things all play into if you get more money or, and so for us, like it's really that balance, because we really believe in quality experiences too. And so if it's a smaller number of people, but it's working, or, so it's just trying to manage some of these things, right? But what we did see was, that in the university system, there was a gender equity report that was released by the University of Toronto in 2013. And so I read that with great interest, and what it inspired me to do was really look at the university system with it. Well, the numbers were there and they were clear. And that was something that we didn't always have a good handle on the numbers. And it's not a numbers game, just so you know, but it is something that you can at least create a baseline and then set some goals and then say, okay, well, if we do this, we think we can increase, the number of women by 5% in, this year or whatever. So that was something that sort of I was really curious about. So I started to explore it, and we did have so Lorraine had gone to one of the conference meetings, like one of the university conference meetings, and talked about some of our programming. And then they approached us, and so some of the universities. So we did a pilot, and the pilot was really to provide some funding to allow either an athlete that was transitioning from high performance sport in the university context into a coaching role. So whether it's an assistant coaching role or supporting, someone moving into a head coach role. And the concept of it was that we would do some shared funding to provide a small salary to the coach, so that so instead of going to work at the library or the grocery store, that they could actually, dabble in coaching and be in a learning environment. So with a mentor and like a learning plan, so they could develop some PD and other coach education opportunities. And so we started 1 year. In 1 year, we did 3 pilots, so 3 coaches. By the second year, in those 3 universities had expanded to 9. So right off the bat, like it just, the jump was pretty good. And part of it was that, it's communicating the opportunities. And so without really putting it out there or having the program or, really knowing what interest there might be, you can't gauge it. So when some of the student athletes saw this program, they were really interested, and then that's where it generated more interest. So we were thrilled with the outcome, and we've been able to provide that now for the last 5 years. And just to acknowledge that the CCA, so the Canadian Collegiate Athletics Association, has also had a long-standing female coach apprenticeship program, and so they have some traction as well. And now youth sports received some funding over the last year to also build a female coach apprenticeship program. So it's starting to gain momentum, and it's wonderful to see. So really what it does is it's you assume that it's a safe space for them because they've been in the program. Now they're transitioning, so they have some of the coaching connections, they have the mentors, which could be the coach or somebody else, and they have that environment to learn and grow. And they have I think the biggest thing is really like that, moving from the role of being a teammate to being now in this coaching position, right? So there's other education that can be available there, but so those are the types of things that we're trying to do that we always adjust and review and see what's working, what isn't. But it's just to give another example. And and we've really focused in on mentorship a lot because we feel it's a really good strategy and tool for development, and is also it can be used in any way you want to look at it, whether it's safe sport, whether it's equity, diversity, inclusion, you name it. So we created a female coach mentorship model, which has a mentor guide, a mentee guide, and a sport admin guide. So people it's meant to be there to use for anyone. So, you can explore it and see if you're in a ready position to take that on. And we built our programs around it. So it supports the mentor, so such as our Canada Games apprenticeship program. And then we've actually launched this past year an enhanced mentorship program. So we actually have designated CAC female mentors, and we have female mentees, and it's multi-sport, so it's across a number of sports. And the other thing that we were really thrilled to be able to do this past year was partner with the Black Canadian Coaches Association. And so they formed in June, and it was really inspired by Leanna Osei, who is the founder, who as we had the experiences with the escalation of Black Lives Matter. And so that was one of her among a few others for her, to create the organization. And right away we connected, and we said, you know what, we would love to partner with you. If you want to create a Black female coach mentorship program that you lead, we'll support. We have the infrastructure, and we were able to do that. And so we're really proud of it, and it's gained a lot of traction, and we're hoping we will continue this year. And so those are just some of the things that we've been doing. And because we have a full team too, I think we have a bit more capacity now within our department to take on a few more initiatives and continue to support the system.
So great. And I was hoping you would talk about the Black coaching, Black women in coaching movement as well. And I'm just so thrilled to see. And again, you're just spanning all the topics and showing the connections and how you end up kind of full circle in a way. Jenny Lim you might know her from Canadian Women in Sport, and she was on an episode recently, but she said, you can't have an inclusive space unless you have a safe space. So the fact that you're now in that space, right? Focusing on how do we create a safe space to support all these other things that you've already kind of laid the groundwork for. It'll all feed into itself. Beautiful. And then the initiatives you describe are very, get down in there to the grassroots and make sure those people have these opportunities, but also be thinking about the leaders we have within our space to guide them and sponsor and support and create opportunities for them. Wonderful. In your mentorship work, that the guide, the mentee, the mentor guides, and all the work you've done in that area has been phenomenal. I've seen it picked up in so many different ways and places, and then learned from and customized for different contexts. Fabulous to see. You've talked a lot about community. And so I'm sort of making my way there and realizing, it really is. It's about linking arms and connecting with other organizations. You've mentioned the word partnership. You started with community right at the beginning, that it felt so much like a place where you could have fun and be connected in your social life and learn from mentors, and so supported. Can you talk a little more about the role of community in building diversity, in building a sense of inclusion within sport, of equity and accessibility, and safety. What do you think? Why is community so important?
Yeah, I think that we all live within certain, communities, right? Like whatever that community is, whether it's a national community or, a small town community and, people associate and are very, tied to those experiences that they have at whatever level they're at, right? So, I guess one thing that really stands out for me in the equity, diversity, inclusion space and community is that, for us operating at a national level, it's a little more difficult to try to implement things on a national scale when it comes to equity, diversity, inclusion. And I say that because there's actually a lot of really great work happening at the community level. And that's where the learning can happen. And that's kind of a place that we would need to go to have a better understanding of whether it's a sport that is really integrated into the community, or the community embraced sport and brought it, within their environment. So that was definitely something that I realized very quickly when I started doing some of the work, because some of it is, within your own organization and where you want to go and what sort of what does success look like? What does better look like? If you're talking about being more inclusive or being more diverse.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been navigating that as an organization for a number of years now, and it can create a lot of confusion when it's not necessarily clear, but it's this exploratory phase of trying to meet people where they're at, and trying to get to a place where we understand each other. So where I'm at and what I understand is not going to be the same as what another person, their lived experience and what they know or believe about anything, right? So it's really been fascinating, to go through the journey and really learn from others. So there's things happening like on an organizational level within the CEC that we're working through, and and one of the big things I guess I could share with you that was more of an aha moment for me recently was the fact that where we focus a little bit around behavioral change when we talk about equity, diversity, inclusion, or even safe sport, where some of the work we're doing right now is more about shifting that to structural change. And so structural change, is is really about documenting things and making it transparent. And so even if I go back to when I was talking about coaching and the operational and the relational, it's very similar in the sense that it's about, okay, what is our position on this? Like, what is our position on building a product? If we want to build an e-learning module, and how are we going to engage people, and how are we going to make sure everybody's represented, everyone's at the table? So it's in fact a bit of a relief. Like it's a daunting task to document so many different processes and expectations, but at the same time, it just makes it so much clearer and transparent, So it's that kind of discovery of trying to understand things like our history, our Indigenous history, our Black Canadian history, that I think is really important from a context perspective to understand today, what we're experiencing, what we're trying to better understand. It has to come from like understanding our history and so, and then trying to build trust and engage people is part of it. And so again, it goes back to building that community and building those relationships. And so that's how you connect people together. That's how you build great things, is by having that representation. So that's what I think it's about. It's connection, it's community, it's communication. Like there's those pieces are so important. I'm not sure I answered your question, but I hope.
Oh yeah, I mean, you could really just talk about anything, I'm sure, and it would all connect again, right? Inform and expand upon what you're working on, what's happening. Yeah, and that's the thing. We talk a lot about learning communities at Rural Roads and how important it is to, you're not just learning from the instructor or from the text or the theorist. It's everybody together, and therefore you have a bit of a responsibility to bring your learning into that community as well. But it's a safe space and a brave space because we're all kind of there together and we've all agreed. I love what you're saying too about the interplay between the sort of softer relational, our values, and then the structural. And when we talk about culture, we talk about the artifacts and the values, and they just constantly reflect one another. And it doesn't matter where you come at it really, but both are crucial. And that shows up in what you're saying about coaching. If we're going to professionalize it, it says a lot about how we value, what we value. And I think there's a resistance to the structural change. Often people will argue, well, it doesn't have anything to do with structure, or they're afraid to let go of the structures that have been there for a long time and change those. Let's dive into, like you and I have talked a bit about Safe Sport, and it's your latest portfolio here. And so you're operating in this world of safe sport, and there's so much, CAC is responsible for so much evolution in that area. And so thankful and admiring of the work that's been done and how quickly things have been put in place. It's beautiful to see. And so you started by talking about organization, the organization Skate Canada, how amazing it was and how it functioned so well. And there was this real level of expertise and professionalism. And how do you see the structure of organizations? What can NSOs do structurally to make sport a safer place? What can we do provincially, municipally, locally, all the way up? What kind of structural changes? You mentioned the board, like learning the role of the board at Skate Canada when you came in and worked in the organization. What else? What are some of the things that you think could really contribute to making sports safer for all?
Yeah, it's such a huge question, right? Like it's just, it's about system alignment, right? And that is what it is. And so the complexity of that is getting there, right? So, and that's why I was able to really appreciate the fact that when I not when I was at Skate Canada per se, but when I left Skate Canada and I realized that this structure and governance doesn't really exist in a lot of other sports, is where I was, again, another one of those moments where it's like, wow. So, so I guess I could use Skate Canada as the example of their governance. So, and this really dates back to, well, I'll say the 80s, but probably even before that. So really just that Skate Canada at the time, Canadian Figure Skating Association, became the sort of like the governing body and the hub for membership and events and programming standards, like everything. So so the way it works is, if I was a coach, but as a coach, I pay a membership fee to Skate Canada directly. So I'm a direct member of Skate Canada. And I'm also affiliated to the province, that I coach within. And but essentially, all things sort of are legislated by Skate Canada or structured by Skate Canada. So the Can Skate program, as an example. So their Learn to Skate program is a national program that's delivered by clubs. So it's like all of the program plans, all of the badge systems, like everything is all done at the national level, and there is that trickle down to the delivery that happens within clubs by the coaches, within provinces in terms of like the competition structure, all the training of the coach training programs, the officials training programs, all of those things happen from a national level and or go through the system that way. So it's very coordinated and very consistent, right? Essentially, I mean, there is flexibility within your own programs to do things, but essentially the Can Skate program is the Can Skate program, and that this is the way it's run, and competitions and requirements and different tests and qualifying systems, right? So then, I guess if I could explain the difference, it would be that when I started working at the CEC, like national sport organizations that I worked with directly, start talking to me about, well, we can't really legislate that, or we can't, even if we try to, run this program, it still would be adopted or not by the province or territory. So the systems aren't connected the same way, where in fact, in some cases, the provincial territorial body has full jurisdiction over their programming, and they may choose to align with the NSO or not, right? Because that's just not the structures. They're the way that the alignment is happening. So it's just difficult, right? So I really wasn't fully aware of that, and so I could understand how difficult it would be to implement programming. And the reality is that when people will push against the national body or whatever body, but when something goes wrong, then they're definitely knocking on their door for help, right? So if we get to a place where it's just more of a two-way street, and that really are working a little bit more together, I think it would really help with the system alignment. But from I think where we're at today with Safe Sport, I think obviously there's a lot happening at the national level that is fairly consistent from one sport to the next. We all have to implement the Universal Code of Conduct, right? So that's how the code is happening, the alignment with the definitions of maltreatment, the mandated safe sport training, the third party use of third party for investigations, duty to report. So these things are all lining up at a national level. And in some cases they are getting implemented at other levels, but it's going to take some time. And I think what we can do as an organization, so the CEC and our partners, which are our national sport organizations, as well as our provincial territorial coaching representatives across Canada, is just create some alignment in our messaging and in our programming and our levels of support, so that we can get to a place where we can create resources that are easily accessible, that explain things in a really concise way around. So like rule of two could be the example. And, so if it's rule of two, it's like, there is some pushback there, because it's really asking coaches and athletes to change the way they communicate, and, driving to practices together and things like that, is difficult when you're innocent, and when you have a good relationship and there's nothing wrong, but everything's good until it isn't, right? And so that's really hard to conceptualize when it's not part of your environment, or it's never been something you've been faced with or dealt with. And we know that, like, the large majority of our coaches are good people doing the best they can. They are well-intentioned, and they're there for the right reasons. They're usually there because their children are there and they're coaching their children. And so we're not always equipped to deal with some of these other things that are happening. And that's come to the surface, and now we're in a bit of the messy middle here, and so we're going to have to go through it. And we are really heavily in this engagement stage right now with listening to our coaches, listening to our partners, meeting with them, sharing the services we already have, trying to understand what they need so that we can be a good resource, or we can develop appropriate training or other resources for them, and stay in our lane a little bit too. Like we certainly don't want everyone to duplicate things that we could take on, but we want to have that dialogue, and just try our best to be consistent across the system, right? So that we try to create clarity, we try to create the best resources possible to help all our stakeholders, navigate the system we're in.
Yeah, great insights there. And I notice, I think you mentioned NSOs, national sport organizations, and feeling a bit like, especially in Canada, where we have all these different provincial bodies, and sport happens differently in all the provinces because of different laws in all the provinces. And we love that diversity in Canada, but it can be confusing or kind of stifling for the NSO to know, well, what role do we play? How can we do
Yeah.
something nationally? Or like you say, as a CAC, you're trying to save sport, but you're operating a national level. It can be hard to impact really. But that idea of providing the resources that people can then reach to easily, the templates, what do you see as some of the biggest structural barriers to safe sport, safer sport, sport that is safe for all, or any of the barriers? What are the biggest things getting in the way of that happening? I keep hearing it's like anything. It's like EDI talk as well, well, we can't say anything, or being worried about being politically correct, back in the 80s and 90s. So you might say the wrong thing and people start to feel a bit strangulated or stifled somehow. And I've heard someone say, well, safe sport is actually creating a culture of fear, which I think is crazy. But at the same time, I can understand it, that now people are so afraid to do anything. They worry that people won't come and offer to coach, or that we won't see the same kind of, I don't know, freedom around sport, that it's already facing enough challenges. What do you say to that, and what do you think, what else is getting in the way of safe sport being really unfolded smoothly and effectively across sport?
Yeah, I think, sport is in this culture renovation, that is where we are. And so, like anything else, people don't like change. And that is where we're at. So for sure, trying to get policies in place. I think one of the barriers with that is that policies are well-intentioned and needed. Like we need policies. Policies need to guide our direction. I don't think anyone could argue with that. But the problem with policies is that they're 15 pages long. It's like we're finding it like people sign them, but they don't read them, and it's creating problems. So, it's around the translation of those policies. So it's like, okay, we have the policy, but we need to engage our stakeholders in making sure that they understand it, or that it's written in a way that they understand it. So we engage them in that process. And then it's like, okay, well, what does this actually mean? What does it mean for me in terms of how I just, how I work with my athletes, or, and just create understanding. So whether that is something like setting expectations around, even for selection of athletes to teams, right? So it's things like that were just happening in the past. And now, I guess in terms of this fear culture that we're hearing about, I think it's that things have been operating a certain way, and now there's, like, for athletes in particular, like there's a clear line for them in terms of where they can go to report, and it's a good thing. Like, we need it, and at the same time, it's sort of that fine line of, well, is this is kind of in the gray, like this is maybe not like something criminal or something that is considered maltreatment. It's somewhere in the middle, and I don't know where to go. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to go this route, right? And then at the same time, with coaches, I think what I'm hearing is that is trying to, like, having these conversations about, like, some of them are difficult conversations. So I think part of it is in the education is equipping coaches with tools to have difficult conversations, right? So we're aware of that, and I think we've just created a new module that's called Creating a Positive Sport Environment, and it does have some elements of understanding maltreatment and duty to report, but at the same time, it's really focused on participant-centered coaching and providing some scenarios, case studies, and examples of, how to communicate with your athletes, how to have difficult conversations, how to create those positive experiences that, now, like, we've kind of labeled safe sport as, sport free of abuse, harassment, discrimination. But safe can mean different things to different people. And so that I think is what causes a little bit of the confusion that we're in right now. And I think we need to go through it we're going to come out better on the other end, and we're going to come to a place that's clearer. And I think we're going to create brave spaces. That would be a goal, right? Is to create, so a safe space is, the definition of that can vary from one person to the next, right? Because what I think is safe could be different from what you think is safe from someone else. So if we change the language a bit around, like, a brave space would be a space where, you know, we can give and receive feedback. We can have a conversation about, you know what, that's not okay for me. This is what I need, or, you know, those types of things that we have to create those environments, and we need to probably provide those opportunities for coaches and athletes to have open conversations to get to that place.
Yeah, I love that. I love brave spaces. I'm hearing more and more people talk about that idea that because if I feel safe, I will be more brave to learn. But how do we create it? And I think we're bumping up against this other sort of long-standing or enduring belief in sport that it must be an uncomfortable, kind of scary place that we have to push through in order to be truly tough, to be truly high performance. And it's interesting just to watch that tension and how we're going to wrestle through that, because that's a deep-seated belief and assumption about what it takes to be a performer. And yet we don't think that way in education. We don't think about making it maybe we do, a really tough exam. Maybe, maybe there are some similarities there. But as an educator, I don't think I'm trying to create a really challenging, painful experience that people have to endure to get their degree, But yeah, then I think about the old school approach to a PhD or something where, you want to break the person down because it has to be worth it. So that culture's there. I love your metaphor of renovation, and I'm stealing it because I think, I'm always in the state of renovation because my husband's a builder. And so our house is always half torn apart, and it's uncomfortable. But what helps is when you have the vision of what it's going to look like. And when you said, that clarity, knowing that we're going to get to that brave space where people can learn and develop and contribute, ask questions of anybody. It doesn't always have to be that third party over there, They could go to their coach, a partnership, beautiful. So I'm going to try to remember that and carry that forward when I have those kind of conversations. What else would you like to tell me about? We have a couple minutes left. I'm going to steal from you and ask you about, what's working. What do you want to share? What do you want to promote? What are your kind of last words you want to get out there to people who are interested in these topics within sport, creating brave spaces, diverse, inclusive, safe?
I guess what I would encourage people to, to reach out either to myself, to our organization, to their own colleagues, like just, create those opportunities to connect and communicate with each other. And I think that, we're living in a bit of isolation, obviously, these days in terms of, a lack of that human interaction, which, we'll appreciate so much more when we're back to a place where we can, be together. But we just through some of the, the meetings we've been having recently, it's really eye-opening that, we get really focused sometimes on our work and what we're trying to do. And, but there are other people doing similar work, right? So we can really learn and benefit from the learnings of others, or the problem solving they've already gone through, or the critical thinking that's happened to get to, a better place, or navigate through a difficult situation. And so I guess my parting words would be just to kind of lean in on your colleagues, or not even just people you don't know that are doing work, similar type work. And there's just so much that we can gain from that, and, share those ideas and move us all, forward in that direction together with all these different initiatives. And like I have, a lot of confidence in the ability of the system, right, to get to this values-based approach to leadership and change. And I think that high performance can coexist with, all of the safe sport pieces that we're trying to implement, and that's part of the work that we can do to create that clarity, in today's world, it's about the imagery, right? The visuals, the infographics, the quick bites of information, and we know that, and we're very much trying to translate a lot of the research that we do as well into these quick bites of information that people can grab and go with. So it's definitely that's part of my current role in the work I'm trying to do. Is like there's so many things, like there's so many things we're doing and we want to do and we want to help, and so how do we consolidate that in a way that people can digest it, and access it easily, and get what they need out of it, and get the important pieces out of it, right? So that's very much top of mind for us right now, and I think through all these engagements we're having and listening to our coaches and our sports, I'm just really confident that we're going in the right direction. We're going to learn so much. We're here to listen, and then we're going to move. We're going to translate things in a way that are going to be useful for the sports system at large. And like our vision is to inspire a nation through sport, and that's very much what I feel is part of my role, our organization, and I'm really confident that we can do that together. And that's that piece about bring it back to community, right? That's what we're in. This is our sport community, and we want to keep it relevant. And Canada is a sport nation, and we really identify with sport. And so, we take all our learnings, we reflect, and we just build back better.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm really confident too. I see you guys everywhere. I see the connections happening. I love it when you talk about making it real, translating it so it's useful, relevant. And we see that with Rule of Two, actually. I've seen that as a really great case, where it starts with this concept based in principles, but it's translated very quickly and easily. And even the fact that you honed in on that, because that's something people can pick up and go, yeah, I can do this. I can do this. And it actually is central to everything, right? Being more respectful of that relationship and power balance. Beautiful. We didn't even get to the power balance. Love your description of leaning on your colleagues, leaning into the team. That's sport, isn't it? That sport teaches us that. Whether you're an individual athlete, you're still always a part of a team, and the value of that. So loving it. All the metaphors, references, how things have intersected so beautifully, all these different topics, and given us a great deal to think about, but also a great deal to follow. I just feel like I want to just keep drawing people's attention, and I do in so many ways. Any environment I'm in where I'm doing any kind of speaking on topics related to sport, CAC is always there, right? And I'm always, linking to your resources and your teaching and the courses that you've developed online, phenomenal. Like I said, the handbooks you've created, beautiful. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. Really appreciate the time that you spent with us today, and I'll be in touch. Take care.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thanks, Isabelle.